Welcome everybody. We'll give maybe a few more seconds for colleagues to join us, and we'll start an exciting webinar for you today. My name is Marijke van Staden. I'm the director of ICLEI's Carbonn Climate Center, and I'm delighted to be part of this exciting day where we're going to launch the ICLEI Carbonn Climate Center Academy series, specifically focusing on green finance training, which is a hot topic for all our local and regional governments out there. For those of you who are not familiar with the Daring Cities series, we have these annual forums calling and sharing details about daring city leadership, our subnational leaders who are taking action to tackle the global climate emergency in their local context. So thanks so much also to the Daring Cities team who are helping us with this webinar. Now, as part of this whole program, the Daring Cities actually also has several other webinars on other topics. So take a look, check that out on our website. But let's zoom in today on who we've got in the room. We would like to also launch a Mentimeter to understand and get your answers at the start of the program that will also inform some of our conversation pieces today. So if we can get our Mentimeter launched, that would be fantastic. And in particular, today we want to focus on what is green finance and sort of give you highlights and pointers what one can do. And again, looking at the offer that ICLEI is providing, starting with the launch today. So take a look at the chat function. You can then screen the QR code or the link there. I think it would be maybe helpful if we can launch the questions. So the first question is also, where are you joining us today? From which city, which country? Super happy to see colleagues already from the US, Brussels, Germany. Good countries and cities are coming in. What does SGP stand for? That would be an interesting one to unpack a bit later. Spain, fantastic. Indeed. We also, later on, will also address, of course, our colleagues who are waking up slowly at this time of the day in Latin America and in the Americas in principle. So you're getting a sneak preview today. Let's go to the next question, if we can. Which type of organization are you working for? We would like to also get a sense, are you working for a local, regional or national government? Are you working for development banks or development agencies? If we can get your input on this one, that gives us a good sense. So several local government representatives, several people from the academia and research space. Fantastic. Great. And our next question. What comes to mind when you hear about the Nordic model, which has been one of the spaces that has given us the exciting opportunity to dig into a model that can really transform the world potentially if we take that further into the climate finance space? Well developed, fantastic. Social security, spot on. Welfare, great. Progressive. I would also say innovative. This has been an exciting role model, which is exactly why we're also pulling this into our thinking to see if we can test something that has been a proven success recipe. Nothing is also helpful, so we'll have a few people in the audience who still need to learn about this, which is perfect. We've got the right speakers here. And then the question, do you know about sustainable finance? Have you never heard about it, or are you an expert on this, a super expert on this? Give us a sense of your level of understanding of sustainable finance. Okay, somewhat familiar. Great, so we've got a spectrum here. All right. Excellent. Super. Okay, that gives us a good sense of who's in the room. Thank you so much, colleagues, for joining our first Mentimeter. We'll have another one at the end. Also to do some checkup on a few other questions. Now, without much ado, I am handing over the floor to Natalia Salazar, who is the head of our Innovative Finance Global Lead for ICLEI. We've got her working together with myself in the Carbonn Climate Center, where we're presenting this wonderful new opportunity on green finance training. And we've got a wonderful lineup of speakers. You see here the photos also of Claes Ramel, the head of finance from the city of Malmö in Sweden. And we've got Remus Busman, the sustainability lead from Nordea Bank based in Denmark. So these are the guys who know the Nordic model, and they will also talk a little bit about that to help unpack this piece. And this is exactly what our training is also going to touch on. So Natalia, without much ado, I'd like to hand over to you. Please share with us what is the Academy, what is the Nordic overview, and what is this cool training program that we've got. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marike, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone that is joining today. Thank you for the time and thank you for expressing this interest. So my name is Natalia Salazar, Head of Innovative Finance at ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability. And I would like to thank you for joining us and to welcome again to the webinar, introduce you what we have now, what we have launched, we're launching today, which is the ICLEI's Carbon Climate Center Academy and its upcoming training series. The Academy itself is one of the newest initiatives led by ICLEI, and it serves to support cities, to support regions, local and regional governments in general, to translate its climate ambitions into local action or local ambition. And our focus for this Academy series and these training programs is, of course, capacity building, knowledge transfer, and practical implementation tools, which we want to provide. But what is the Carbon Climate Center Academy? It is an education and training platform, as I mentioned. It is designed specifically for local and regional governments, but also for the general public, such as people that are working in think tanks, associations, students that just want to know more about green finance. And the objective of this Academy series is to build institutional and technical capacity. So either professional, personal, or maybe again on the institutional level. And we want to focus through this Academy on climate mitigation, adaptation, integrated climate action in general. And here we want to provide hands-on learning opportunities. So also connecting with a network of experts that are working on green finance, modular trainings that are tailored to the different knowledge levels, peer-to-peer learning experiences and exchanges, and access to actually tools, very frameworks that are now very important to know, and global expertise, which is very important. And the objective also is for you, for everyone that wants to join these trainings, is to learn from the proven models and adapt or actually learn from the best practices. And here I want to introduce what actually our first module, the first course, the first training will be focused on, and this is the Nordic model. We'll also hear more from as Marike and you will see from the speakers that we have experts on the Nordic model and more specific on green finance. But we are kicking off with the Nordic model because this is an entry point for our series. It offers a practical integrated approach, but most importantly, because the Nordic model, the Nordic countries, as you know, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, they have been for a long time really recognized for the climate ambition, their really good policies in terms of sustainability, climate action, economic competitiveness, and also there's a lot on how to collaborate between different municipalities or local and regional governments. So we want also to provide this knowledge, to provide actually this best practices to show you what actually has been done, what actually works, what doesn't work, and why. And why not inspire, in case you're working specifically for a local and regional government or a research, or based on your own needs, inspire you to adopt or maybe learn or again adapt the best practices. So we will have this training actually organized in different modules. You will see also from the slides that we have, and we are still actually now working and building the agenda, connecting with different experts from the Nordic region, as you will see again from our experts that will speak later. And it is again aimed for all of you that are working on planning, on coordination, on policy, perhaps policy design, or anything that has to do with access to finance. So how to embed the long-term cross-sectoral thinking that we have seen in this region. What are those practical tools? Again, case studies, more importantly, and how to translate that has worked again in these countries, in this region, to your own reality and for you to understand. So it's not about replicating, but actually about adapting the best principles, the best practices again. And so I encourage you to explore this learning opportunity. We'll be launching officially during the first quarter of 2026. So I will also give you, or we will give you more details at the end, how to register and how to express again your interest officially and be part of this initiative and actually work with us and actually with our global experts on this academy session. So we are very excited. Thank you again very much for joining. I'll now give the floor to our two speakers. So first to Klaes. Thank you so much, Mr. Klaes Ramel. Please, the floor is yours.
No, thank you so much, Natalia. I hope everyone can hear me fine. I'm Claes Ramel. I'm head of finance at the local Swedish municipality named Sweden. It's the third largest in the country, 350,000 inhabitants roughly. And I have a little agenda here today that I want to present. Now, as Natalia has expressed, there are good models working for us in the Nordic area. And rather than patting ourselves on the back for the easy access we do have to finance, I want to mention a few things about the enabling conditions that under which we operate here in the Nordic area. I also want to just basically start, if you're looking to fund your investments or operations, whatever you have access to, need to finance, where would you start? Come in a little bit and speak about the capital markets that we use here. That would be our primary funding source. Also a word about the way we operate, and we try to diversify our funding sources. Of course, coming into how we work with sustainable finance, and the last little thing about credit ratings that we also use. Now, the enabling conditions would be to say that as a local government, we do have local income taxation power. So the people living and working here in Malmö pay income tax to us. So a growing city hopefully means also growing workforce participation and higher income. So we can, and we are in the favorable position of being a growing city. That means we need to build more roads, more parks, more schools, more living flats, etc. And we also have, at least in Sweden, I'm not exactly sure how it works in the other Nordic countries, but we have a central government equalization system, meaning that the government sort of takes care of your conditions under which you are operating. Do you have high unemployment or low unemployment? Do you have socioeconomic challenges or not? Now, the government in this equalization program wants to give all cities equal opportunities, whether you're growing or whether you are decreasing in numbers of inhabitants, and regardless of how high or low unemployment you have and the socioeconomic situation. So that gives everyone a very fair starting ground, regardless of size, etc. And since there has been a capital market long and well operating in the Nordic area, we have the favor of trust. Trust is established in the system. So if we move on to the next slide there, whether you are somewhere in Europe or in America or wherever your local market and placement is, I think it's easy to say, well, just establish a capital markets program. Well, where would you go if you wanted to start with that? And I'd say to look around over your shoulders where you are. What commercial banks or local banks do you have savings bank in your area? Can you borrow money from them? Can they help you to access the capital markets? That's a very best way, I would say, to start finding out where can you find the money and if the capital market is available. Of course, you can use both. You can use your banks, your local banks or other banks, or the capital market. And moving to the next slide, what are the requirements to get into the capital markets? Well, basically, the capital market is in my perspective, a three-party system. There is the borrower, there is the lender, and then there is the bank as a middleman. In the capital markets, typically the bank operates as a middleman. So there needs to be a contractual agreement between you and the bank that where it's being established, you are the borrower as a local government, and the bank is a dealer trying to find you capital in the capital markets. They know insurance companies, pension funds, and other investors. And you raise funds by issuing a security. If you go to the bank and borrow money directly from the bank, that's typically a bilateral contractual agreement between you and the bank. Here is a program under which you can issue a security, which is frequently listed on an exchange where you are, so that it's priced and transparent what you are doing, and also a marketplace for buying and selling that security. And a little bit about the contract. It stipulates, how do you go about issuing that security, and what could happen if something doesn't work as it should do, and then responsibilities, etc. It's a rather complex legal agreement. When we established our capital market programs, we used the local lawyers to help us understand the ins and outs of that contract. So institutional lenders, banks, and borrowers, that's sort of the capital market. And if we move on, now the way we operate as City of Malmö, we typically would use credit facilities with our banks, such as Nordea and other Swedish and Norwegian and Danish banks and Finnish banks. We have facilities available. We pay for those facilities, an annual fee, and we can draw money with very short notice. That we do have with the banks themselves. Then we use various capital market programs. We can issue in various currencies, short-term, long-term, reaching market participants in many ways. And I'll come back to why this is important, because this is sort of the foundation for us upon which we then issue bonds that are green and social. So we have three types of capital market programs here at City of Malmö. But we also use a third way, because again, we may have the credit facility, we may have the capital market access, but we also want to have other sources, and that we do in the project finance. When we build schools or when we build houses, flats, we can show these investments to the investment banks, such as, for instance, the EIB, European Investment Bank, or Council of European Bank as well. And they are happy to finance typically half of those investments, given that they meet their criteria in sustainable aspects. So that would be those three ways that we typically would access. And sustainable finance doesn't have to be through the capital market. It can also be done directly through the bank. If your investments meet sustainable criteria that the banks have, they may be able to give you more favorable bilateral agreement to raise funds. Sustainable finance in the capital market, here we play by the ICMA green bond principles, meaning that we, for instance, specify the various categories of investments that we have. It could be buildings, could be biological plurality, it could be climate adaptation. We have 8 different categories and criteria for those. And then we make an annual report to investors where we say, these are the way we have used your money, and these are the impacts of those money. And we measure and come back as much as we can and bring information back to investors. But there are also other, you don't need to do use of proceeds. Use of proceeds is as it sounds, how do we use the money? And another tool is called sustainability linked. You may have a measure whereby you say by 2030, you want to reduce your carbon emissions in various ways. And I think I have 1 or 2 more slides there. Yes. Before I come into credit rating, let me say one thing about the sustainable finance as well. We have green bonds and social bonds. So it's meaning that the social bonds are more complex. I would say green bonds is a much simpler way to start. Here it's more about the investment in itself. A social bond typically would include the investment, but also how people and operations take place in that investments. So it's a couple of more layers of difficulty in defining and following up and making your colleagues understand what you're doing. A green bond, where you have, as we do, mostly real estate, then it's a rather digital way to decide, does the building meet the energy consumption or not? If it does, it's on the inside. If it does not, outside. Yes, and then coming back to the credit rating there, this is basically fine if you can have that. It costs you money. It opens up some doors for you, maybe investors that otherwise wouldn't be investing. They may have rating criteria policies that you need to have a rating and of a certain quality. You must also be accepting that there is a degree of scrutinization in your operations. How do you work? They will be looking at plenty of things. This is a signal, I would say, to lenders that you are serious about borrowing money and that you want to be transparent and that you're willing to put your sort of credit status on the line. But it's also kind of the icing on the cake. I wouldn't start in this end. Finding the bank, possibly the way to the capital market, and on the capital markets or in the bank, you can add your sustainable ways of raising funds. And what has been extremely helpful for us here at City of Malmö is the dialogue that comes with having a sustainable program. Whether it's with a bank, they would know your operations better, or the capital markets, where investors, lenders actually come to us and ask us about how we do things, what are the impacts, why we do certain things. And having this understanding between the borrower and the lender is a diversification in itself. I think lenders are more likely to come back to you whether your conditions worsen financially or otherwise, if they know your operations and what you strive to do. So I think that's a very important way to diversify your funding sources. And that was probably what I had, I think. Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Klaus. That's very helpful. There's some interesting questions coming in as well. So please take a look at the Q&A and we'll look at that following our next speaker. So I'm super happy to introduce Remus, who is specifically going to talk about, again, very interesting approaches to as a sneak peek into the program, looking at funding mechanisms, instruments. It builds very nicely, I think, on what Klaus already has presented. So Remus, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hello everyone, and good to be with you today. And Klaus, what a perfect segue, because I have some great news. I do work for a bank, And I mean, we discuss a lot with subnational governments. We discuss with corporate customers, of course, about their sustainable finance needs. But I can give you a personal perspective. Although I work for a bank today, I will talk in a personal capacity, but I'll give you my perspective on things. And as Klaas just said, I think it's important to know the customer very well. In this case, the municipality or the region. So what you will see is that banks have started and actually evolved their knowledge on their customers regarding their sustainability agendas in the last couple of years. But let's start with something else. Let's start with actually why banks are doing this. So if you can flip the slide, you will you will see it's no secret, but actually banks need to decarbonize as well. So we need to report our carbon footprint and we need to decarbonize. And there's not a big secret that the large majority of our footprint comes from what is called financed emissions. So the money that we lend to our customers or finance our customers, that is by far the largest impact, the largest footprint that we have. So when it comes to our biggest impact, it is of course to support our customers in their climate and sustainability transition journey. So that's why we are very, very eager to know our customers better, and we have actually developed our way to do that. We call that climate maturity ladder, and I can tell you just a few things about that, and you will see a schematic definition of that in this slide. You will see that what we basically did in terms of knowing our customers' transition plans and engaging with them, we try to rate them on some tiers, starting from what is called tier 5 aware, so having some awareness about climate change and the materiality of those risks for that organization, to becoming more mature, actually planning a transition, reporting some metrics, making a commitment that ideally is backed by science. So when we talk about climate, we can talk about SBTI type of commitment, and then having a full plan that is aligned and that is credible. So we started this journey as a bank in 2023 with what we call our most vulnerable sectors. So we look at what is our lending exposure to which type of customers we lend money to, and what we deem as vulnerable. It's where we would actually like to start with having more and more information. And of course, this is done mainly in a corporate setting, but there's nothing totally different why we could not translate this to a subnational government as well, so a municipality, a region. And I know that the journey for municipality to unlock sustainable finance, it can be varied. As Klaas just showed, there's a need for diversification. So I hope that what I'm illustrating here, some sort of a journey that starts with actually having that strong commitment and building the strategy, and then actually reporting on some relevant sustainability metrics, then actually preparing that project pipeline, engage with the financial institutions, and actually getting to the point when we can actually diversify your funding through multiple options. We can talk about blended finance. We can talk, as Klaas said, about getting into what is called communal credit, so like regional banks that finance municipalities. We can talk about more like European programs like guarantees, because banks really like to de-risk, when they offer a loan, if someone else takes the risk. So through a guarantee program backed by European Union through EIF, we would typically do that. But there are, again, the journey is quite complex, and I mean it varies for you guys, you know, from city to city, from region to region. But I hope that I can, you know, you can find some familiarity on the main topics here. And by the way, this is based on a guide that I found on C40 Knowledge Hub, and also OECD has a good paper on that was published recently on how to mobilize sustainable finance for cities. Yeah. So I hope that this is familiar to you. And now if we move a bit into, I mean, the actual formats that we put under the umbrella of sustainable finance, as Claes said, there are mainly two categories. We either talk about this use of proceeds type of format when it's very specific what you are financing. You know, proceeds are allocated to predetermined assets or projects, and in here we have multiple formats. For example, City of Malmö, I know they have a green bond and a social bond framework. Also, sustainability bond framework is an option. Then if we move to the right, we can also have what is called a dual framework, so a combination of use and proceeds and sustainability linked. Then what is sustainability linked? You might ask, well, it is when you're not tying the proceeds to any specific asset or projects. So the money can be used for more general purpose, but the essence is to link it to some relevant core sustainability KPIs. So of course you need to do all that homework, all that preparation before you can have an agreement with a bank on a sustainability link type of financing. And this can be, again, it can be in a bond format or it can be in a loan format. Claes talked about banks being dealers. That is typically when a bank splits what we call it a ticket size. So let's say a municipality would like to get 100 million euros in financing, then it might be that one bank coordinates this arrangement, but they split the ticket size into multiple parts, so the risk is taken by multiple banks. Or it can be a pure bilateral agreement where City of Malmö and Nordea enter into this agreement, and we have full control over that. Yeah. Here I have a bit of an internal recipe, very high level, very simplified, on how we look at customers before we can say, okay, this customer or this municipality seems ready for sustainability linked loan format. So we like to go together with the customer through this checklist item, and it's very valuable because we find out a lot more about their maturity level. They also realize that there might be some gaps that they need to fill, either in terms of gathering the necessary data. You will see that the middle part is called data. The fact that we are asking customers to provide us with a historical baseline, so their starting point, because from that we derive a trajectory. But even before that, of course, we need that credible strategy, that sustainability strategy that has identified both more short-term sustainability KPIs and also long-term, and also this annual target. So I mean, a typical target for, let's say, a Nordic municipality would be to be CO2 neutral by 2030. I know that is the ambition of City of Malmö, and also they have a stated goal to use 100% renewable energy by 2030. So that is the type of goal, the quantifiable type of goal that we like to see, and then we can derive a trajectory from okay, where the municipality is at that point to where they would like to be in 2030, let's say, as the end date. And yeah, we start again with the strategy, then we're asking for the data as a prerequisite, and also we have some reporting requirements. It's not necessarily to have a what is called a second party opinion, so a lengthy exercise in which basically a credit agency goes and verifies the framework. That is, of course, recommended, and especially in the bond issuance, it is recommended, and it is actually required in the bond issuance, not for the loans. But anyways, what remains between the bank and the municipality, in this case, if we agree to a sustainability-linked loan, is the idea that there has to be an annual report. So we need to check on the progress, because there's also a financial incentive that we give. We give a discount on the interest rate of the loan if those KPIs are achieved. And the way we measure that is by, seeing each year what is the progress. So that is very important. Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. And with this one, we want to say that we, of course, follow market guidance. There are principles for how we structure such a loan or a bond. These are called sustainability-linked bond or loan principles, and they have 5 steps. We don't need to go into the details of this, but high level, it is about selecting the relevant KPIs and calibrating the targets, because of course we would like ambitious targets. Then it's about putting all of this into the loan agreement, agreeing on the discount mechanism. So what happens if the municipality achieves their targets, and also what happens if they don't. And then there are principles specifically related to the reporting. So how is that happening, and the verification mechanism. So the fact that we want a certain level of quality in the verification for those KPIs and those metrics. Yeah. All right, let's see. I feel like I talked maybe too much about theory, but we can see this in practice. So if we move a bit to the north from city of Malmö, we go to the city of Helsingborg, also in Sweden, and see that they actually have a sustainability-linked bond framework. They were actually the first municipality to issue sustainability-linked bonds in 2022. They updated that in 2025. They now are in compliance with the latest market guidance from ICMA. They actually have a second party opinion from S&P Global, and they have structured this with 2 KPIs and with 2 associated targets. The KPI 1 relates to carbon footprint, so it is about absolute scope 1 and 2 emissions, and there's a reduction trajectory. The KPI 2 is very interesting because it relates to youth unemployment. So it is a very ambitious target that the municipality has defined to be going from below national average to above national average in a number of years. And you will see in the next slide, without going again into too many details, because you can find this very easily and read yourself, you see how detailed the structure is in terms of where do we start from, what is the annual target that we commit to in the legal agreement. So you see that both on KPI 1 and KPI 2, and you can see that in KPI 2 it is a particularity of this data that it cannot be measured each year. So we observe that every 2 or 3 years, and that can be, it's part of the format. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a yearly target, but it can be every 2-3 years. That the format allows for that. What we are looking for is actually a core KPI. So we think that city of Helsingborg did something really, really strong, and this could be used as a model for other municipalities to tackle youth unemployment. So we are very, very impressed by what they did. Yeah. I'm sure that we can go into a lot more details, but I mean, given the time limit, I will rather stop here, and I would say let's discuss more in the Q&A session. But thank you for this one.
Thanks very much, Remus. I think you've unpacked it in a very nice way. And for me, it's interesting to look at the questions coming in, and there are a lot of questions. So may I call all my panelists up? Natalia, Klaus, if you can join us, that would be wonderful. And then let's see if we can respond to all the questions. I think maybe my summary from where I'm sitting at the moment is the Nordic model is impressive because it's been piloted for a while now and it's been working for quite a long time. But you see the evolution also with Helsingborg, for example, updating their sustainability bond 2022 and then again 2025. So this is an evolution that is positive because we're learning, we're bringing lessons learned into the process. And this is certainly not an easy space, but it is an imperative space for us to enable action also in low and middle income countries, which is also one of the questions we have. So maybe let's start with Anthony's question. He's based in Western New York. He says, can we please discuss ways of applying the Nordic model also for low and middle income countries? And he says they have some answers. So happy to hear from our experts, but also Anthony will give you the floor briefly if we can. And then we've got about 8 other questions, so let's keep them rolling. Does anybody would like to respond to the question on, is this a model for low and middle income countries?
Ooh, this is a difficult one because it encompasses a lot. And if it's particularly low and middle income communities, I think I saw there was one question in the chat as well regarding there are no banks. We can't get money from institutions. Now, the Nordic model didn't happen overnight. It took a long time. And I tried to mention that in the enabling conditions. This is not happening anyway quickly. This is long-term political agreement among parties over time, 10, 15, 20, 50 years. Now, so of course, obviously that's very hard to copy and implement, but to go from there, I mean, I'm sure there could be low income or high income that, societies that have access to banks and capital markets, regardless of where you are. But I was very curious to understand, if you are in Ghana and if you don't have banks and you can't find the funds, where would you go? If there are no banks, of course, it's a different story. Yeah, maybe look internationally.
There's no easy answer on this one. I do think we need to talk about a couple of things. So many countries have signed up to the SDGs. So the Sustainable Development Goals imply that they need to look into this matter. The Nordic model could be transposed to some countries, not as is, but it would need to be tweaked if you take it to another country. In any case, it's context specific. It links to national and financial regulations and legislation in the country. However, what is interesting in the Nordic model, and I think that can be done in any country, is that the local governments come together to say, we have a problem, we collectively want to address the problem, and that they can create this kind of collective communal space to say, okay, how do we deal with this? And different spin-offs can come from that. However, we need their national governments to come in with guarantees to de-risk. National governments must step into the space with de-risking strategies. Otherwise, it's a non-starter, I would tend to say. But then if you link it to, so our colleague from Kisumu County, and thank you for joining, you're on a lot of our webinars, you're mentioning the poverty transition, human rights, justice, and climate change. All of these pieces must come into this sustainable financing space. So these are wonderful topics. And again, I like the Helsingborg example, youth unemployment. That's so practical. So bringing that to the table and make that part of your sustainability bond, we can do that. And maybe you as a local government may not launch a green bond, but your energy utility can, or your partner organizations or utilities, waste management, for example. There's also a colleague there from Nigeria dealing with waste management. These are utilities that might be able to launch the bonds, and you can join maybe in a public-private partnership constellation. So there are solutions, but you need to look indeed into your own tailor-made space. I'm just looking now at the questions. Also a very interesting question around the bankers who do not know how to evaluate these social components. And again, especially informality in many of our cities in the developing world, you have massive informal settlements. How do you deal with any infrastructure upgrade in that space? So I don't know, Remus, if you've got a hint or some signals or things that you can think of can we train the bankers? Can we make a module to do a training session for them? Because I think that's a very important point that was made here.
Yeah. I mean, just to start by acknowledging that, yeah, we need to be trained as well, right? We are doing everything we can, and we are in a way privileged that Nordea operates mainly or exclusively to the Nordic space, right? Where the market is more mature, but it has taken us a long time. Even if you look at city of Malmö, and correct me, Claes, but I think that your initial green bond framework is from 2017, and then you came with the social bond in 2023. So I mean, it is almost a decade, and then we can go even further back. So it shows how long it can take to do this. And I totally agree that we need to be trained into evaluating. We do that all the time. We are, let's say, more experienced into the climate pillar than into other pillars now. We are starting to discuss more about biodiversity loss. We are expanding to, other topics like even this youth unemployment as a KPI in itself. I mean, it was fascinating to see how City of Helsingborg described in great detail what they are planning to do, how they will collaborate both with local NGOs, how they will do both proactive and reactive measures. So every time we need to, as bankers, we need to be, we need to be on top of our game. So, I mean, I totally acknowledge this. And I understand it is a problem in particular where we have this informal economy and where it's hard to get support from local banks. But as you said, I think it maybe has a merit to expand to international development banks to see what they can offer. I know Nordea is not in that space, but there are other banks that potentially could help even a project in Ghana. I don't have exactly the answer right now, but I can look into it and we'll come back if needed.
Okay, great. Thanks, Remus. I mean, this is work in progress. We're also trying to find solutions ourselves. I think the future is very uncertain and we're looking for innovative solutions. Maybe, Natalia, could you speak a little bit to what we as ICLEI do with our TAP program approach, and also this impact investment piece, which that's a question Tanya raised, is the KPIs. How can we get impact investment moving and, again, make the banks, help them to understand that this is what the civil society actually is looking for. We don't want just to waste money, but you're looking for infrastructure that is new or updated or retrofitted to be adaptive to known climate impacts, adaptive to possible climate impacts, so making more resilient, which is difficult to do if you're not sure what are the impacts, and making it decarbonized if you're just purely looking from a climate space. And then the just transition angle, maybe Natalia, you can also speak to that point on how we deal with that aspect. Over to you.
No, thank you. I'll be very brief, but thank you, Marika, for that. So what we do in ICLEI is providing support to local and regional governments or subnational governments, facilitate access as much as we can to finance. And here's where our transformative actions program we connect so comes into question, because we use this platform, we use this tool to connect the applicants or the different cities and local and regional governments to potential financiers and project preparation facilities, among others. Why? Because we need to make sure that we can facilitate that access. We can review those project proposals that are aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals with Agenda 2030, and making sure that they are ambitious, cross-cutting, that they also touch into different angles, different areas, such as you rightly mentioned, Marike, the just transition, making sure that also is people-centered. So this is the work that we do at ICLEI, and of course we work not only, we're not alone on this space. We work with many partners, banks, and of course regions, globally. So over to you, Marike, for any other further details, or of course to continue the discussion.
Thanks, Natalia. Bernice is asking a question for Klaus. Do you pay back or redeem the social or green bonds that the city issues? And if so, how are you able to ensure that the city is liquid or liquid cash enough, and that the city cash flow is working to redeem these bonds? That's a very interesting one.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for that question. Well, basically, this brings in the diversity aspect. And as a municipality, we basically don't redeem, we refinance. That's what we do. So when it is a green bond, for instance, we have our assets, we make our annual reports. The decision on the assets meeting the criteria is taken by a committee in the city. So if they are deemed to meet the criteria, then the investments are fine. We put them in a pool of sustainable green investments. When the bond matures 5 years later, for instance, then the assets are still considered green in our perspective, because when we made the decision that they were green, that was under the conditions in 2020 then maybe, and now 2025, we, for our perspective, they're still green. And then we roll over our investments. So basically we don't pay back the loans as much as just refinance. And with the growing city, chances are we're going to grow our need to fund investments as we build roads, etc. Waste management, I think someone worked with waste management. We have huge issues of funding and investments in wastewater management. I want to come back to, Marika, what you said though about jointly pooling your interests. If you don't have banks and if you don't have support from the central government, very difficult. But the Nordic model has also these joint funding vehicles for local munis and regions. In Sweden, there's one, Kommuninvest. In Denmark, there's Kommunekredit, etc. In Netherlands, you have them as well. Not everywhere, but that's sort of coming together, backing up each other, coming out with a stronger credit profile as you back each other. Then you may find lenders, or your chances of finding lenders would be. But that's again also a long journey, obviously. But independently, with few banks and few investors, of course, very tricky situation. But looking abroad, maybe trying, if you have credit ratings, you could reach out to other investors and so on. Yeah.
Thanks, Lars. I do sense we need to write up a case study on the Malmö experiences, because you've got such a wealth of knowledge, and we can maybe also even help us frame the right questions, because I think sometimes we don't even know what the questions are because it is such a complex space as well. So let's take that on. I wanted to zoom in. Let me just check for more of the questions coming in. Of course, there is an interest in the training offer. So Natalia, my sense is we're spot on in the sense of what we're going to offer, because I know it's an exciting opportunity. I also wanted to flag that where, especially with the informal sector particularly, people want services because they want to have access to clean energy, food, water, whatever. And I think maybe thinking of partnerships with your community members who could also be part of your investment strategy could be interesting. People would like to co-own their own local infrastructure because then they benefit from it potentially financially as investors, but maybe also reaping the reward from that, but also then benefiting from the infrastructure per se. So those people, public-private people partnerships is something that we as ICLEI highly recommend that you invest and explore in. If you want to set up, for example, a local renewable energy opportunities, linking that to your food, energy, waste management nexus, you can do very, very interesting things there, also community owned. And we also are in partnership with other global initiatives, such as the City Climate Finance Leadership Alliance, the CCFLA for short, where we're trying to unlock some of these very difficult, challenging questions collectively. So it's not ICLEI alone, it's not the banks alone, it's not the cities alone. There is a collective space where we're looking at these challenging questions. So keep the questions coming, because it's not stopping with this webinar. I did see there were a few more questions coming in.
There was one question, Marika, if I may jump in.
Yeah, please.
On the return aspect of the investments. Now, if you're not a corporate, but rather a municipality, we don't think like that.
Yeah.
It's not the return that's important to us. And indeed, making an investment more sustainable than it otherwise would have been most likely costs you more money. So, of course, a decision taken somewhere else in the city of Malmö to make an investment may then be cheaper if you say, well, let's keep the energy level or consumption higher because that's going to cheapen up the material we use. Well, then we know for sure we're not going to reach our targets in 2030 if we do that, but it has a price. Not always, but a lot of times it does.
Absolutely. I think so. We need the voice of reality, but also, again, I think the role of local governments is also changing more from purely a territorial administrative space. You're turning into having to protect the resilience and protecting your people, your businesses, your territory from the impacts of climate change. And again, this space is completely underfunded. So there's a lot to be done. And again, the conversation is even taken as we go into the climate COP negotiations in Belém in Brazil. This is also financing climate actions, and you have to step up and scale up that financing. And projects cannot take 10 years to develop from the start of the idea until it actually gets investment funding. This timeline needs to drastically shorten. So we have just purely bureaucratical hurdles as well as political hurdles as well as practical implementation hurdles. However, I don't think we should give up on any of this. I think this is the collective space where we can bring in the very clever brains in this space to find solutions is exactly what we're trying to do from the side of ICLEI. I would like to hand over to my colleague Natalia as I have to run to my next meeting. But it's so wonderful to have these conversations. And colleagues, thanks so much for very interesting questions, which we will take further also in our training program. And it's also wonderful to see so many colleagues and friends who we've met over the years. Let's keep this collective space and let's start asking those right questions. Natalia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marika. And again, thank you very much, Remus and Klaas, for joining today's session. So before we wrap up and we close the session, I'd like to bring to the audience actually a poll where we would like to ask you, first of all, which are the topics that you would like to see addressed in our academy. So please feel free to, of course, choose just one and make sure that, again, this is something that you are looking into either participating later on or really interested to hear about. So it would be either governance frameworks of sustainable finance, funding mechanisms and instruments, project development implementation, very general, of course. We can definitely go more into detail, but for now, those are the topics, and then future trends and capacity building. Thank you for voting, and of course also we can see, thank you for that. We see funding mechanisms and instruments as the preferred one, followed by project development implementation. Thank you again very much for voting. And again, before we close, I'll just also introduce our next virtual forum, which will take place, which actually will demonstrate or will focus on how local leadership, biodiversity, and nature-based solutions drive impactful and coordinated climate responses, focusing on Sierra Leone's and Tanzania's efforts. You can find, of course, more information on the registration link in the chat. And finally, just very few words as we have just 1 minute left. But thank you again very much for our panelists for this very active session. We heard really valuable insights from the Nordic regions. Financial actors highlighted, how those key elements to unlock sustainable finance at the local level. We heard from the city of Malmö, but also examples of the case study of Helsingborg, of the city of Helsingborg, both in Sweden, and how the growing capital market requirements are needed or are very important for diversifying funding sources. How this Nordic region actually has helped or actually advanced the space. And we explore also very briefly this green and social bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, the frameworks that are in place, and of course, how one of the key messages that I personally took and that I also would like to share with you is the importance of the ongoing dialogue with sustainable finance programs and how this is very important, between the different stakeholders that are involved. There's definitely a need for diversification to embark on a structured journey. And we need to also involve the private sector. Here we need a lot of elements such as sustainable finance frameworks, quantifiable goals, data collection, transparent reporting. Again, thank you very much for joining. We look forward to welcoming you for the next sessions, and also stay tuned for our program. Here you will also see how you can register if you're interested for our Academy series for next for the next year, 2026. There's an email address that you can just send your expression of interest, and we'll be sure to come back to you. So again, thank you very much, Claes and Remus, for participating, and thank you all for your active participation.